Chicago, November 10, 1991. Here's what most people don't know about that day. The most trusted woman in America was about to do something that could have destroyed everything she'd built over decades. Oprah Winfrey sitting in her signature chair, hands folded, trying to keep her breathing steady. She's done this 1,000 times before. Interviews, tough conversations, emotional moments. But today's different. Today, she's carrying a secret that's been eating at her for 37 years. The red light flashes on. 22 million Americans are tuning in, expecting another regular Tuesday morning show. They've got no clue they're about to witness something that'll change television forever. This is the story of the day Oprah lost her voice and found her power. By 1991, you've got to understand, Oprah wasn't just some talk show host. She was basically American royalty. 5 straight years at number 1. The Oprah Winfrey Show was pulling in over 20 million viewers every single day. Her production company, Harpo, was worth more than $300 million. Forbes had just put her on their list of America's richest entertainers. She owned her own studio, controlled her own content, and had the kind of influence that could make or break careers. When Oprah recommended a book, it became a bestseller overnight. When she talked about a product, sales went through the roof. But here's what nobody really understood about success at that level. Picture living under a microscope where every single word gets analyzed, every gesture gets picked apart, every emotion gets calculated. Oprah had become America's therapist. The woman everyone turned to with their problems, their pain, their secrets. The crazy part? She was helping millions of people heal while hiding her own deepest wound. You've got to remember, this was 1991. One scandal could end everything. One moment where you showed too much weakness, and decades of work could disappear. Image was everything, and Oprah's image was perfect. That warm smile that never cracked. That knowing look that said she understood your pain. The confident woman who seemed to have life figured out. If you've ever carried a secret that felt too heavy to share, you know exactly what Oprah was dealing with. Behind all the success, behind the carefully built persona, was this wound that just wouldn't heal. Perfection's a prison, and on this Tuesday morning, Oprah was about to break out. The show that day was supposed to be routine. Topic: childhood sexual abuse. Guests: survivors willing to share their stories. Format: the usual deal where Oprah listens, offers comfort, provides resources. Safe territory, you know. Professional. Controlled. But here's the crazy part nobody saw coming. The morning started like any other. Oprah got to Harpo Studios at 6 a.m. Hour in hair and makeup. Script review with her producers. Final checks with the crew. Her team had zero idea what was building up inside her. Neither did the studio audience settling into their seats. And definitely not the 22 million people getting ready to tune in. The guests took their spots on that familiar set. 5 women, ages 25 to 62. Each one had survived childhood sexual abuse. Each one had decided to tell her story on national television, hoping it might help someone else find the courage to speak up. The cameras started rolling, and these women began sharing their stories. That's when something unexpected started happening to Oprah. She's listening to their pain, and it's like looking in a mirror she's avoided for decades. She'd built this incredible career creating safe spaces for people to heal. Her show had become this place where folks could share their deepest pain without getting judged. But she'd never created that space for herself. The first woman talks about the shame. How it followed her everywhere, whispering that she was broken, that somehow what happened was her fault. Oprah's nodding, saying the right things, keeping it together professionally. But inside? Those walls she'd built are starting to crack. The second guest describes the silence. Years of carrying this secret alone, terrified that speaking up would destroy her family or make people see her differently. Oprah's leaning in, voice gentle, doing her job perfectly. But that weight in her chest is getting heavier. Each story's cutting deeper. A woman abused by her stepfather. Another one hurt by a family friend her parents trusted. A third who suffered for years while her mom worked double shifts, never knowing the danger her daughter was facing. Here's what happened next that changed everything. Oprah's sitting there, listening to these brave women tell their stories, and she starts seeing herself in every single word. Their shame was her shame. Their silence was her silence. Those carefully built walls protecting her from her own past. They were crumbling. Her hands start shaking just a little. Her voice catches for a split second between questions. The studio audience doesn't notice anything. Cameras keep rolling. But inside, Oprah Winfrey's reaching a breaking point that's gonna define everything. The worst part? The total hypocrisy of it all. She's asking these women to be vulnerable, to rip open their deepest wounds for millions of strangers, while she's sitting there protected behind her desk, hiding her own truth. She's thinking about that little girl she used to be. 9 years old, scared and confused, carrying something no kid should ever have to carry. She's remembering decades of silence, building this perfect public image that showed everyone everything except the one thing that mattered most. The room goes quiet as one guest finishes her story. Everyone's waiting for Oprah's response, for those words of wisdom that made her famous. But for the first time in her career, Oprah Winfrey's got nothing. Actually, that's not true. She's got a choice. This is where it gets intense. The studio's dead silent. 22 million people are holding their breath. Oprah Winfrey, the woman who always knew what to say, is just sitting there. You could hear a pin drop. Then, without any warning, she starts talking. I was raped when I was 9 years old by a 19-year-old cousin. Those words hit the room like a bomb. The audience gasps. Cameras keep rolling, catching every raw moment of what's happening. I never told anyone. I was too ashamed. I thought it was my fault. Her voice is breaking now. 37 years of hidden pain just pouring out in front of millions of strangers. Her hands are shaking, but she doesn't stop. It wasn't just him. There was an uncle. A family friend. It happened over and over, and I never said anything because I was scared nobody would believe me. This wasn't in any script. There's no teleprompter for this moment. This is just raw truth from someone who'd spent her entire career helping other people find theirs. Picture that scene for a second. The most powerful woman on television, this carefully constructed public figure, is falling apart right there on live TV. But what's coming out isn't weakness. It's something way more powerful. When I was 14, I got pregnant. I lost the baby, and I thought God was telling me I wasn't supposed to be a mother because of what I'd let happen to me. You can hear the shame in her voice. This isn't the confident Oprah millions of people knew. This is that hurt little girl she'd been carrying inside all these years, finally speaking up. The woman who just shared her story reaches over and grabs Oprah's hand. The other guests are crying. The studio audience is completely stunned, watching something they've never seen before on television. The woman who seemed unbreakable was breaking. Right there. In front of everyone. I understand the shame, she says, looking straight into the camera, talking to those millions watching at home. I understand keeping it secret. I understand thinking it was your fault. But I also know that keeping secrets makes us sick. That's the moment everything changed. The thing she thought would destroy her became the thing that transformed her. Being vulnerable became her superpower. The control room's going crazy. Do you cut to commercial? Keep rolling? Nobody's ever dealt with anything like this on daytime TV. But Oprah keeps going, keeps sharing, keeps bleeding her truth for the world to see. For years, I carried this shame around. I built my whole life making sure nobody would ever see me as damaged. But sitting here, listening to these incredible women, I realized I was asking them to do something I'd never been willing to do myself. This was the moment that defined everything that came after. She could have stopped right there. Could have said it was a mistake, gone to commercial, pretended none of it happened. Her lawyers were probably freaking out. Her publicist was definitely planning damage control. But Oprah made a choice that changed her life and the lives of millions of people. She refused to run from her truth. Instead, she leaned into it with courage that left everyone speechless. I'm telling you this because I want every person who's been hurt like this to know you're not alone. You didn't do anything wrong. And you don't have to carry this shame for the rest of your life. The phones at the studio are already going nuts. Thousands of calls from people who'd never told their stories, who'd been carrying secrets for decades, who suddenly felt like maybe they could speak up too. But this wasn't just about sharing her story. This was about turning pain into purpose, wounds into wisdom. We've been letting shame keep us quiet for too long, she continues, voice getting stronger. We've been letting other people's actions define who we are. But I'm here to tell you that what happened to you doesn't decide your worth. Right there on live television, Oprah wasn't just sharing her story. She was changing what it meant to be vulnerable in public. She was showing millions that being real was more powerful than being perfect. The women on her show are nodding, crying, finding their voices getting louder because of hers. The studio audience is watching something they'll remember forever. I spent years thinking I had to be perfect to deserve love, success, respect, she says. But perfection doesn't connect us to people. Being honest does. Being real does. Being willing to show who you really are. This wasn't just a TV moment. This was culture changing in real time. That decision rippled way beyond her Chicago studio. She chose truth over image. Connection over protection. She risked everything she'd built for the chance to help people heal. I'm not telling you this for shock value or sympathy, she continues. I'm telling you because when we share our stories, when we refuse to let shame define us, we give other people permission to do the same. The room felt electric. This was bigger than a talk show. This was a woman claiming her full humanity on national television, inviting millions of others to do the same. Nobody expected this call to courage. But Oprah answered it, and so did everyone watching who saw themselves in her story. The response was instant and huge. Within 20 minutes, the show's phone system crashed. Thousands of calls from survivors who'd never spoken up, who suddenly felt heard in a way they never had before. But the real change was just getting started. Letters started pouring into Harpo Studios by the thousands. Not fan mail, but thank you notes from people who finally felt permission to heal. Therapists all over the country reported more clients coming in for help with childhood trauma. Support groups started forming in places where none existed before. This wasn't about ratings or publicity. This was real human connection happening on a massive scale. Critics who'd written off Oprah's show as just entertainment suddenly got what she was really doing. This wasn't celebrity gossip or cheap thrills. This was transformation, healing, the courage to face hard truths. Oprah's show completely evolved after that day. She shifted from surface-level entertainment to conversations that changed lives. She started using her platform not just to interview famous people, but to tackle serious issues, give voices to people who'd been silenced, create space for discussions that needed to happen. The ratings went through the roof, but more important, the impact got deeper. Parents started having real conversations with their kids about safety and trust. Survivors found communities they never knew existed. The whole conversation about childhood abuse moved from whispered secrets to public awareness. Here's what really happened in the months after that broadcast. Oprah launched this whole campaign to educate parents and kids about recognizing and preventing abuse. She worked with lawmakers to make stronger laws protecting children. She funded research into trauma and the best ways to help survivors heal. Her magazine became a place for stories about resilience and recovery. Her book club featured memoirs by survivors who'd found healing. Everything she touched became part of a mission that went way beyond entertainment. The woman who lost her voice that day found something way more powerful, her real voice. And America couldn't get enough. Companies that might have run from the controversy instead doubled down on their support. Viewers who'd watched casually became devoted fans. The show's influence spread worldwide as it got syndicated to countries where talking about abuse was even more taboo. But the biggest change was in Oprah herself. That armor of perfection she'd worn for decades got replaced by something way stronger, the power that comes from embracing your whole truth. She started speaking at conferences about trauma and healing. She partnered with universities to fund abuse research. She used her money and influence to create safe spaces for survivors to tell their stories and find community. The empire she built after that day wasn't based on image or entertainment value. It was built on authenticity, on this radical idea that sharing your most painful truths could become your greatest gift to the world. Years later, when people asked about that moment, Oprah said it was the scariest and most freeing thing she'd ever done. Scary because she risked everything. Freeing because she finally stepped into her full power. The comeback wasn't just professional. It was personal, spiritual, life-changing in ways nobody, including Oprah, could have seen coming. Today, we live in a world where being vulnerable is seen as strength. Where authenticity matters more than perfection. Where sharing your story is understood as a way to heal, not just yourself, but other people too. That world exists largely because of what Oprah chose to do on November 10, 1991. She didn't just share her story that day. She changed the whole conversation. She shifted the culture. She proved that your biggest wounds can become your most powerful tools when you're brave enough to transform them into ways to help people. The little girl who'd been silenced by shame became the voice that helped millions find theirs. The woman who'd hidden behind perfection discovered that her imperfections were what made her truly powerful. If you've ever felt broken by your past, if you've believed your pain disqualifies you from having purpose, Oprah's story says something different. Your wounds don't define you. How you respond to them does. She could have stayed quiet. Could have kept hiding behind the image that made her successful. Could have chosen safety over authenticity, protection over connection. But she refused to quit on her truth. And when she refused to quit, she gave millions of other people permission to refuse to quit on theirs. That day in 1991, Oprah Winfrey lost her voice. The careful, controlled voice of a TV professional. But she found something way more valuable, her authentic voice, raw and real and unafraid. Sometimes what we think will destroy us becomes what saves us. Sometimes losing everything is how we figure out who we really are. Sometimes you've got to break before you can become truly unbreakable. The courage to be vulnerable, to share your deepest truths, to risk rejection for a real connection, that's the legacy of November 10, 1991. Oprah proved our greatest strength doesn't come from what we hide. It comes from what we're brave enough to share. Not just with people we trust, but with a world that needs to know they're not alone. That's the power of refusing to quit on your truth. That's what happens when you find your real voice. And that's why, more than 30 years later, we still remember the day Oprah lost her voice and found her power.